wipe out every team that was up and then taking out Furious Gaming, and they still don't get the favor of the Circle Gods? I don't know. But then again, they've lost Circle every time, and all they've been doing is just been picking up eliminations. So maybe this will work out for the better of them. This is going to be the most difficult one yet, though. Meanwhile, 4 AM on the northern side. They'll lose the cover of the dip, so yeah, they have to leave the dip side. It looks like they'll lay down some smokes and use their vehicles as a last-ditch attempt at some hard cover. Ideally, I think 4 AM chokes out the Geek Fam team, and then with the last 3, goes in for the last fight with the side of GK. Actually, they're not going to wait to choke out the team of Geek Fam. They're going to go ahead and slam right in already. 4 AM now turning on the aggression. This gives an opening for Geek Fam to maybe get into this zone as well.
This is the best possible opportunity here for Geek Fam. As 4 AM, they take on their only other competitors with the 3 men still up. It is GK Esports. Gaith right now trying to hold them off with a few nades, a few mollies being sent on out just to make this approach for them as difficult as possible. Has at least ticked down those HP bars to half, but it's going to be Ragnar and Hope that have to apply that backup, that have to give that backup and that covering fire. Otherwise, Gaith might be finding themselves in a difficult position. Ragnar now moving on up as Gaith goes down to a nade. So 4 Angry Men, they might take this as the trigger to move on up.
Yeah, that's another really good nade right there. Knocking that player down to have it get the confirmation too. That should be an easy revive for the 4 AM team, as now GK on the back foot will probably play a bit more passive. There is still a team of Geek Fam out here for both teams to deal with, and Hope gets one of Geek Fam. 4 AM picks up the other. We're down to the last 2 team. It's a 2v2 situation. Savon here, such a veteran player. We have seen this player all year long. They get the revive. 3v2. GK on the back foot here. Ching Chen pushing up close, establishing pressure. All the meanwhile, 4 AM getting ever so closer. Do they know Ragnar is in that shack, though? They're throwing util at the building. If they had an idea of clearing out the shack, I feel like at least one util would have gone their way. So they got to be careful. And just as I say that, they do check the shack with the grenade. 3v1 situation. Hope, he is the last hope now for the GK team. 1v3. UMP out on the side, gets one, can get the second one, but the trade is good. And that is 4 AM coming back from a very quiet year last year. This team looking so strong. And then last year, they pretty much fizzled out and disappeared. But they are back again this year, and they are back with vengeance, taking the very first chicken dinner of the week for Group Yellow.
You might even say that 4 Angry Men are back from the grave and they're ready to take that potential spot in the grand finals already, making statements here on the first map and bringing in a beautiful performance. I mean, towards that final path, I was worried. You know, we mentioned it. The best possible opportunity for them would have been to find Geek Fam first, then worry about GK Esports. And even in that initial entry to GK Esports, it looked difficult. I mean, there were mollies, there were nades. Every which way you looked for Angry Men, they didn't have an opportunity to just take a breath. Yet they made it happen, and it came down to that clinical precision, that execution towards those final phases, just slowing things down and ticking off the boxes, making sure they're doing everything right.
Take a look at that Geek Fam stats, the util use. That just shows how much they had to fight through. But ultimately, Geek Fam with the eliminations, it came down to 4 AM getting the massive chicken dinner, and we are setting the stage for a great week number 3.
And it's the 4 angriest of the men that pull out the first chicken dinner here in Group Yellow. What's going on, everybody? This is how you get a tournament started right here. You know that 4 a.m. have to be super hyped after that one. Hey, but Geek Fam and GK also putting up some big points at the start of the day here, Seven.
An amazing performance there at the 4 Angry Men, 11 eliminations, and Sute, X-Proxy were able to mention it perfectly too. After a long time, after a long hiatus of not being in the global stage, for them to do that, that's sending a message. DK though, that was impressive up until the end, Imperium. I felt like they should have done at least a split. They shouldn't have stayed in the house for that long, and they should have actually kept hope there because it worked out perfect for them, but it was a little bit too late.
It was just a little bit too late indeed. Looking at the head-to-head though, Kunshan and Mika of Geek Fam, what a performance from himself. 4 eliminations, 755 damage. He was absolutely on point. They lost 2 players at the mid portion of the game, but they acted so strongly with just 2 players left. Of course, 4 Angry Men, they won the game. Kunshan, welcome back, 33 spam.
I'm really excited to see somebody from Furious Gaming right there. Trigger with 5 eliminations and only 288 damage.
Yeah.
That is so impressive because you know he was looking to steal those eliminations, which is always comes in clutch for his team. And also their precision. How they were able to just hold up people from their position. At one point, we actually thought they were going to be able to maybe come up with the win. We saw Vivo Keyd try to crash on them.
Dude,
I don't know why people keep trying to crash on that spot right there in Erangel. It always backfires. Furious Gaming actually came out super aggressive. I love how many eliminations he got, and I think Trigger was a big part of that, Imperium.
Yeah, I was disappointed. I was kind of a little bit worried about Furious coming into the PMGC because when we look back at the PMPL Americas, they kind of only finished in 9th place. They didn't really look like a solid team that could consistently perform. Maybe that's because I knew they already had their ticket, but yeah, I was worried about them, but very happy with how they performed in this game 1.
That's how you get it done right there. Match number 2 is coming up. The first Miramar of the day. 7, this is the first one we're going to see here in this group. You know, what are your expectations? What do you kind of see coming here for the first Miramar?
My eyes are going to be absolutely glued to Picado. I want to see if anybody is going to try to hot drop. We didn't see any hot drops there on Erangel, but we did see some teams willing to take some shots. I mean, we gotta give a massive shout out to IHC Icy. I mean, the nasty shots with the Ironside Car 98 that he took on 4 Angry Men just to make him back off. I want to see that here in Miramar as well. Obviously, it's a little bit harder because of so many mountains here and there, but if 2 teams do end up landing close to each other, I love Imperium. I love when teams just send that little message saying, hey, don't come this way. We're here.
110%. It is about sending a message. Even though 4 Angry Men ended up kind of the biggest victors of the 2 teams off the back of that initial foray from Icy, yeah, it is still positive to see. And I actually are a team that can and have and will perform on Miramar. They know how to move around the terrain and really hold on to the high ground. Like when we were looking at the scrims yesterday, Demo as a player was moving around so smoothly. It wasn't Miramar, it was Erangel, but he's moving around so smoothly. That does give me a lot of confidence for IHC coming into this game too.
Oh, game 2 coming up here. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at y'all's teams to watch here for this match. So, 7, you know, I'm going to go ahead and look down right here. I see Furious Gaming still up on the list. And I see you got Geek Fam over there, Imperium. Why don't we start with you?
Geek Fam, look, it's a Mika show, and they have UI. Geekay performed really well in game 1, and I know they can, as a full squad, put it together for game 2. So I have a lot of faith in what they're going to be able to bring momentum-wise into the second game.
Okay, you know what? With me, NS RedForce. You guys were a little bit too passive. We saw you holding a very neutral compound, and you guys stayed there for way too long. And something that Imperium and myself were talking about when we were watching the game, I would have loved to see a 2-2 split. I would have loved to see some kind of split, just trying to secure some spot after that compound. I mean, at one point, I think it's after Circle 2, 100% of the teams were on the west side of the circle. That would have been a perfect time to just, you know what, at least send one person to scout see what might be on the horizon. See if you can have other options so you don't end up rotating too late like you ended up doing, and it ends up backfiring. And another one is going to be Reject. I mean, Reject, the champions out of the Japan League. That was not the best performance there. They ended up being eliminated first and 0 eliminations. I'm hoping they can turn it around here in the upcoming Miramar.
Yeah,
Yeah, me too. I mean, these first, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say,
Go ahead,
it's tough for Reject because they were the first team to lose a player, and that can affect your just the flow of the game one, and it can get into your head. So they should just scrub it off and get into game two.
But Imperium is PMGC. Sorry, Jukes, it's PMGC, man.
I know.
If you lose one player, you gotta be able to adjust. That's what champions are made of. You have to be able to adjust.
Love that you mentioned
Well,
that.
let's see who's going to be able to adjust in this next match here. The first Miramar of the day. Let's take it out over to our casters, Zute and Proxy.
Speaking about adjustments, I gotta agree. I feel like we were talking about it too as Proxy. We were feeling like a lot of teams needed to make adjustments. That beginning of that first match, we saw maybe up to 6-7 players just go down just due to rotations alone. Now, if this was like PMPL, PMCO, you know, less experienced teams, you know, I'll give them a pass. But this is the PMGC stage. We should not be seeing that many players go out on rotations.
Yeah, it's questionable. That's for sure. I mean, the fact is we normally would say, like in a PMCO and a PMPL, like you said, all right, it's first map, you know, getting the jitters out of the way, getting the nerves out of the way, but we're still seeing that here on the PMGC stage. But
yeah.
All right, even if we take that into account, you've had that first map, you've had that map to kind of shake it off, you know, get the boots running, get the blood pumping, and now you need to bring the performances that we know you're capable of in the second map, and it's on Miramar. So I feel like if there was ever an opportunity to just to tell the team, slow it down, this is PMGC, we need to bring our performance, it's going to be this map.
Miramar, trickier for rotations though, like even more difficult than Erangel. Erangel, the easiest map to rotate on, and let's be honest, that first circle, it wasn't a difficult circle. Teams should know what's, you know, rotation pathings, you know, at the very least, you know, which rotations path are more safer than others. So I think we might see a big, you know, gap already start to form on day number 1 in the sense of teams that are coming in here with preparation, like mentally, teams that aren't nervous, team that, you know, sticks to their plan and knows what they're doing. There's going to be a big contrast by the end of the day against teams that are feeling things out, teams that are a little bit nervous, teams that don't have the confidence. That's what I'm imagining. There's going to be a big gap between the top and the bottom as we head into the second match. Miramar coming right out here, and it's looking like this playing path not very nice for many of the teams. Might see some hot drops due to this playing path now.
Oh yes, I mean that entire northern portion of Miramar basically a little bit out of the bounds for now for the teams potentially making those earlier drops, trying to get the vehicles in and trying to get themselves well situated in the positions, you know, they might be a little bit more comfortable with. I mean, we can think of a handful of teams that, you know, do love that northern side, like FALCONS over there towards Hacienda del Patron, maybe even Game Lords there towards San Martin, and now it's a bit out of reach, Zute, just a tad.
What is in reach is El Al-Sahar for both IHC and BESIKTAS. IHC not doing well at all in game number 1. The only excuse I'll give to them, though, is they lost to Geek Fam, and we saw Geek Fam. I mean, that team was just running hot, running solid. They were crushing everybody. But IHC, they get another chance here, taking a 4v4 now off the hot drop against BESIKTAS. BESIKTAS, they lost a 1v4 that last game. We caught it in the highlights at the end. Is that going to shake their confidence just a little bit here?
Actually, they won the 1v4 in that
Oh,
last
sorry,
game.
they won the
From
1v4.
BESIKTAS up against Train to Kill that just pulled out a 1v4 from who knows where. So now, I mean, confidence has to be reigning high, and that is going to be selling a little bit of danger here for IHC already with some initial damage. And you can see the rest of BESIKTAS, they are swarming in. They're trying to close up the rotational pass that IHC actually have available. And Gaith is somehow Neo as well.
Yeah,
Just dodge the vehicles?
that rock is your friend, but tell you what, the 3 other players that are picking up weapons right in every cross compound.
Oh.
This is Yath is as good as done here.
Oh,
The
backup is coming on through.
The most he could do is like waste a little bit of time, but that's one elimination. Another one, Falcon losing one player here as well. Like I said, all due to that plane path. Not everyone can make it to where they're usually comfortable with, and we're already seeing... Oh, Falcon actually lost 2 members already. Oh man, horrible start for the Falcon team. Down to 2 on Miramar this early on. And I think Game Lord looking like... No, okay, I thought they might have seen an isolated player and just gone for early points. Back to the hot drop in the northeast. It does look like it has evened out just a little bit. I would say BESIKTAS have somewhat of a surround, but it goes both ways as Enjoy himself is surrounded. And here's that replay. Falcon losing 1 there, and then probably losing a 2nd player.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the eliminations, it looks like it was pretty spread out. I mean, we had, Game Lords taking 1. We had Genesis DOGMA also taking another. So it looks like for the time being, eliminations are just being spread out amongst at least 3 of the teams for the time being. And just a little bit of scouting out here from the rest of the teams, trying to give themselves space in the vicinity. But absolutely, this is all to do with that flight path. That zone is at the very least, going to be matching that flight path, giving the team some availability. Never alone. Whoa! Yes, we love that. Is going to be taking 2 here from this is Game Lords. Oh my goodness, this is revenge straight off the bat.
Never alone. He's alone for now, but that might be enough as he gets the 2 knocks. Gets the 1 confirmation, almost gets the 2nd one, but Rob's there to save Victor. Get that revive, and now Falcon is really just looking very, very rough. Down to 1 already. At least he picked up the 1 elimination. Never alone, almost might have picked up 3. But maybe another time as we're back to BESIKTAS here. Quite a big stalemate. We have not seen any movement from anybody at all. IHC has been holding their exact same positions as we last saw them, which I can't blame because they're kind of surrounded. BESIKTAS playing it very slow, trying to figure out where everyone is. I do understand why they're playing so slow though, because IHC being so spread out with so many different compounds, you got to be careful crossing into the sightlines. And there's a lot of sightlines to be cleared.
At the very least, I would say IHC has at least that backup. I mean, they're running that 2-2 split, so should any side of their team be taking that engagement, they have backup, right? It's not like the rest of the BESIKTAS team who are all solos in separate buildings on their own. So if they take an engagement, there's no opportunity, there's no potential for backup. So it will be interesting, the 2 different approaches from these 2 separate teams, as they are just going to be holding their forts and seeing how they're going to transition into that rotation, how they're going to transition themselves into that zone. But still plenty of rotations, as we mentioned. That zone, at least matching the flight path into that southeastern portion, means a lot of the teams that took those hot drops, that took those chances, they're going to be rewarded for that with less rotations.
We do see only maybe 4 or 5 teams able to rotate in here. Many other teams' rotations heavily slow down due to, while we have the hot drop in the north, multiple teams getting caught on one another early on. At least it gives them some elimination points for the favorable team. But the rotations are going to be slowed down elsewhere. And this southeastern zone, pretty easy to rotate into as long as, roads go. A lot of different roads, different avenues in for quick rotations. But the terrain is a little bit more difficult. Center of the zone, all you have is that one long stretch of flat territory. So we won't see too many teams being able to take up positions near center, just because there's not that much areas to play in. IHC here and BESIKTAS still in a very, very slow, prolonged engagement. I'd like to see at least one of these teams group up a little bit and get more aggressive, because they're essentially wasting time in a sense. They still need to loot, they still need to rotate. and they need to get a move on. And I think we do see IHC deciding to make the first move as they are starting to group up together, and they have a very, very faint good idea that there is a player there, as they are all looking that way to isolate Enjoy.
RedForce over here taking a look down towards Nongshim RedForce. Sorry, Rejects to RedForce. Wait, this is going to catch me. But now the question is, what do they do in this scenario? There's been a few opportunities, but in the meantime, we'll talk about IHC finally making that move over here towards BESIKTAS, and what a player to take off the plate other than Enjoy. An absolute threat that's looming in this vicinity, so that if they can at least give themselves the space, at least this one elimination, they give themselves an opportunity potentially onto the rest of BESIKTAS, but the Molly will delay that push just for a tad.
Rejects, meanwhile, this time getting a much better rotation and will be rewarded with 1 point. As Enjoy will go down, they isolate one, and I feel like BESIKTAS, they're just not really helping that one player out. We saw how long the players of IHC took to isolate him, and they were jumping around the outside of his compound for a while, and no supporting sidelines whatsoever from any of the BESIKTAS players. That's a huge question mark. Oh.
Oh.
Ooh.
No. Ooh. Okay.
Yeah.
That is a zone. Well, only a half of the zone basically that these teams have available to them. And yeah, I mean, talk about an Eastern rotation. All these teams have been doing in Miramar is just rotating to catch up with that zone.
There's I know Imperium. If Imperium could hear me, he is very happy. Imperium's got a sick mind for that, you know, tiny island ending on Miramar. I remember the last time I casted with him, we had a circle, like nothing like this, but even then Imperium was like, Zute, it's gonna happen. Ooh. It's gonna happen. Well, if it's ever gonna happen, it could happen in this zone. 50% of the zone and water. That small landmass of those two islands on the eastern side, well, it's almost like 30% of the landmass that is left in zone. So there's a chance it could go down there. We'll see if any teams are going to be ready for that. I'm hoping, for the sake of, you know, the teams competing, it's only game number 2. Don't shift out into the islands. You know, give them something to work with here.
I don't know. The fact is that GEEK fam didn't get that zone blessing in the first Erangel, and they literally went to the tippity top of the rankings. They literally went the full mile to try and get some favor there from the Circle Zone Guards, but it didn't happen. So maybe they're feeling a little bit malevolent. Maybe they're going to be bringing in some absolute chaos and making Imperium's day. But over here towards GEEK fam, as we mentioned them already, taking a couple of shots over towards IHC, who, again, they've had such a tough time. You mentioned that they took that time with BESIKTAS. I mean, Godless for the longest time didn't even have meds, and now because of that delay, they're catching themselves on the far end of zone, on the outskirts, right behind a team like GEEK fam. Not where you want to be.
I feel like they should have just kept rotating. They allow GEEK fam to get in front of them, and now with GEEK fam getting into the circle before, they might look to trap the IHC players. This might be a rematch once again between GEEK fam and IHC, and last time GEEK fam definitely got the better out of IHC, and in similar fashion, it was GEEK fam more in the circle compared to IHC, so IHC were forced to press in to the likes of GEEK fam, and once again, see a similar story playing out. BESIKTAS taking a different pathing will avoid the GEEK fam and IHC team, and yeah, IHC, one player going down. Alex might also go down here. IHC, a lot of high expectations for this team, especially since their Mongolian brethren out of Godlike Stalwarts, you know, finished in first place on the second week of the Group of Death. So IHC, man, they got a lot of pressure on them. And the next circle does shift. It does keep that one island in zone. So might still happen as 4 AM find themselves in the very center of the circle. And a lot of teams with a lot of players still alive, but this zone is looking awfully small.
but at the very least, it's giving some opportunity here towards IHC. So they're a little bit closer to the zone, but they still have to try and grab it. And GeekFam have not let up on the pressure just yet. That rotation that IHC is going to make now is going to hit them straight into the pathing here of BESIKTAS potentially if they take it further. So it is a long fight for IHC if they want to get themselves back into contention with the zone. And it looks like GeekFam might even be going for just a little bit of a hunt. They're keeping a line of sight onto IHC, trying to apply that pressure. Maybe they might be rewarded here with a knock or an elimination even. But for the very least, they are locking down this northern portion of the zone to their own.
GeekFam doing a very nice job pressuring out the entirety of a 4-man team. Pretty much sending IHC into BESIKTAS. And now GeekFam don't have to worry about anyone on their backside. And I would say they have a nicer, avenue of approach on their eastern, northeastern side to work into the rest of the zone. Whereas IHC is kind of stuck with those, mountaintops, not very easily traversable. Meanwhile, on the rest of the circle, you see a lot of teams just slowly working their way in. A lot of dips and ridges for multitudes of teams to make it in here without going into full-out engagement. We might see teams lose a player here and there, but it looks like there's a chance we might be keeping upwards of 50 players alive coming into the 4th circle, which isn't unheard of, but with the zone being this small, it is rather, going to be chaotic towards the late game.
Yeah, it's a bit packed. It's feeling a little tight here for the teams. Already we can see a 3-team engagement here between Vivo Keyd. We've got Genesis, DOGMA, GIDS, and of course the Rejects, who all of us are holding high hopes for as the team coming through from Japan. They want to make a statement, and potentially this is the way that they do it. Genesis now applying that pressure over to Vivo Keyd is going to find at least one towards Adrian. That nade's going to be sent on out, so I don't think the confirmation is far off. However, here for Genesis now, if they move on forward, they're unfortunately going to be exposing themselves here to Rejects as well. Rejects, they do have an opportunity to move on up and maybe get a line of sight here to Genesis DOGMA. So this is going to be a very interesting manner in which they have to actually approach and manage the situation.
Yeah, the Rejects team could just bide their time, maybe go for a third party once a fight is fully engaged. But with the next circle shifting, I think they're just planning to prioritize the next zone shift. And here we go, Eastern shift. Nope. We are going to end on the main island. Most likely, Rejects do find themselves in a good position to just keep holding. They don't even have third party because the fight will have to come to them eventually. Vivo Keyd now have to push into Genesis, DOGMA, GIDS. We see Nongsham Red on the south side pushing up into the likes of TEM Entertainment. TEM Entertainment a little bit trapped in on those ridges, those nades raining on in. This area of the map so tricky to navigate and fight because not a lot of teams, have too much experience down here. This zone is a very, unfamiliar zone for many of these teams. Maybe they've only played a handful of matches down here. So a lot of sight lines and potential, entryways not all familiar with anyone.
I mean, if you want to talk about this side, I mean, the team that strikes me as someone who's the most comfortable with this coastline would be the likes of 4 Angry Men, because this tends to be one of their drop sites. Impala tends to be one of their drop sites. Then over towards, Puerto Pareso, it's normally Furious Gaming and Genesis DOGMA GIDS that would find themselves here, at least from time to time in the scrims. We've seen them drop towards that location. So potentially those might be the teams taking that advantage into this next zone, because it is, as you've mentioned, such an odd zone to find these teams in, and now they need to navigate this terrain, and they have to. Otherwise, they might be losing up that opportunity to take a lead. But GeekFam, I mean, just talk about consistency. Once again, finding IHC.
Yeah, I was questioning on the very first game, which team is going to be that edge team that starts dominating and picks up all the elimination points like we saw with HVVP last week, and it looks like GeekFam is going to be that team that plays from the edge and just bulldozes everyone. Up to 2 eliminations. GeekFam still with 4 alive, and with a decent entryway into the rest of the zone. Have high hopes for them this match to see them into the late game once again. Furious Gaming on the southern side. Yeah, I was talking about the sight lines, right? Look at this sight line down there. Through the crack of the window, that means everyone on that ridgeline needs to be careful when they get engaged in a fight. And on the north side, Geek Fam coming in here on the edge, onto the back of BESIKTAS. BESIKTAS already down to 2 as they lost one player extremely early. Yuhai looking to get picked up here. That's a really good Molotov. Snipes getting it in that shack. That's another player knocked. BESIKTAS did get the revive back up to 2. Now back down to 1. It is all riding on the shoulders of Peace here to pull out a potential 1v4. Not looking very likely though.
Not at all. I mean, even if Peace manages to take on the 3 here, as soon as they go outside, they will be spotted out by that flanking position here of Damn Rude. So Geek Fam have this locked down. Peace just going to be taking the jump off the cliff, quite literally, but they will not escape. Snipes will find that final hit, and Milos, with the fantastic line of sight that they had, somehow, some way, still gets knocked down. So Furious Gaming, they now need to recover their numbers. They need to reset.
That revive is coming through. A lot of teams starting to get cut down now as the circle will continue to shift once again. That southwestern side, just so many ridges and pockets for teams to just stay alive in. The circle doesn't change too much. It does force everyone on the north to move in. You see the Rejects team right there getting very, very close to a central position now. And Ching Chen forced to fall back. I don't know if the Rejects know he's here. 4 a.m. Continuing to hold somewhat of the split. Yeah, Ching Chen is going to try and make it out in time, but a little bit too slow. 4 a.m. coming in very strong, taking over the center of the circle on the high ground, but that does kind of put them in potential sightlines to be surrounded by other teams. However, this position does have a lot of ridges to work with, so if they could weather the storm, although the teams circling them will probably end up fighting one another, and Rejects could just sit comfortably.
Rejects managing to pick up eliminations as well, so already a much healthier showing than what we saw on Erangel. Hopefully those nerves are out of the window, and that will be the hope here for Vivo Keyd as well, going up against Game Lords, who have been going from fight to fight. Now another engagement, but they turn it around with that nade onto Grelin, so now there's an opportunity for them to turn this around.
Great utility out of Game Lord. Now it's a 2v1 situation. They don't have the zone. They should look for the last player if they have a good idea that it is only a solo player. See Victor running back and forth, looking to get the confirmation. Cielo here. He's got the M4, level 1 vest only. Another nade about to rain in. Should have spotted, yep. I think he did have a good idea of where Cielo is with that vehicle, pretty much giving a dead giveaway. But it looks like the duo is going to try and prioritize the rotation instead. No, Victor's still going to look for the player, but they're scared to commit hard over the ridgeline in case more other teams take shots back. Well, the shots being returned, now they know for sure where Cielo is. They should isolate this 2v1. They get the side angle. Narvello does get the finish right there, and that is Vivo Keyd eliminated out in 13th place.
I love that from Game Lords, just making sure that they have a different line of sight, that they can take that crossfire and just take that final engagement as safely as possible, since they are running on lower numbers. Hopefully they will be able to move on forward into that zone. I don't think they're going to have a trouble getting into zone, but of course our focus is here towards the southern portion of that zone. Absolutely stacked with Furious Gaming, with Geekay Esports, TEM Entertainment just up a little bit more north. Xavier, of course, in the mix alongside Genesis DOGMA GIDS. So plenty of opportunities for teams to get involved with one another, and of course those third-party opportunities looming around it as well. So Genesis now solely focusing on Xavier, but Xavier focusing towards TEM Entertainment. So this is going to be an interesting opportunity to see how they're going to manage this.
Every team just wants to put one step forward, get 1 foot more close to the center of zone. For Genesis, that would be Xavier, and for Xavier, that would be TEM Entertainment. Furious Gaming, meanwhile, though, on the southern side on the low ground, have been sitting very comfortably, just taking those high angle peak shots onto the multitude of teams on the ridgeline. It is going to lead to another circle shift, and it's just, man, this is an absolute slow grind of a match. Teams just getting slowly crunched into each other with constant fighting. Rejects now feeling the crunch, the pressure of FaZe. Like I said earlier, Rejects do put themselves in a nice center position to get the next zone, but they kind of put themselves just in a little pocket area to get slowly pressed in on. And you can see there, as they try and get the revive. How close they have to be clumped onto one another. Geek Fam, however, on that northern side, working in as a 4-man team. We saw what they could do with 2 towards the late game. Now that they got 4, oh man, it's looking quite scary for everyone else.
I'm saying maybe the winning condition for Geek Fam is just the fact that they never get the zone, because it seems to be the opportunity that they thrive the best in already, applying some pressure over towards Train to Kill, but slowly and methodically trying to get that information, holding on to whatever opportunities they have, because as they know, there are so many teams stacked into such a tiny area and to such a cramped area. You can already see the turnaround there for Angry Men on the back line. IHC still mixed in, still alive, still somehow managing to stay in this one, but for how much longer is the question.
Oh yeah, we got a swimmer. IHC Icy swimming out in the water. Explains why his HP is still red this whole time. Game Lord gets a nice lock on a Train to Kill from the high ground. Taking shots now at Geek Bam. He's got to be a little bit careful. Yeah, decides to back up after letting off that many rounds, because you have a whole entire team of Geek Bam ready to fire back. That knock actually going to be stolen. Geek Bam, 7 eliminations already, and still with 4 players alive, and in a very controlling position, I might add, to pick up a couple more. Yeah, T2K just getting absolutely sandwiched by Game Lord and Geek Fam. Game Lord on the high ground position, but with only 2, not much that they could do.
They also might not just get involved in this engagement, because as soon as they do, well, then Geek Fam, they have that opportunity. They have that line of sight onto Game Lord. So for the time being, Yuhai will be sent on in to get the confirmation, but will actually turn around, potentially spotting out Game Lord there. So some information is available, and they don't want to make that commitment. This northern side is looking absolutely stacked. Icy from IHC in the meanwhile has made it to land, so they're done with their swimming shenanigans. But all of the teams here towards the northern side still pressing in, still trying to give themselves space.
Look at how Geek Fam is moving right now. They look like sharks in the water. From Victor's POV, you can just see them cresting the ridge, up and down, slowly, methodically getting more and more territory control, clearing out the sides. They're about to clear out Train to Kill here. That Molly, though, not fully finishing this player out. No, but they know. They smell blood, and they will go for it. Up to 9 eliminations now, still with 4 members alive. And if they lose the circle, more power to them, like you said.
It's the winning condition, baby. Geek Fam just moving on into every single zone. And again, it's not working with them. It's centering on up, allowing the likes of Rejects still that opportunity in center zone. But as you've mentioned before, all that might be doing is putting a target on their back, as the rest of the teams now need to move in, and time is running out. Game Lord's now going down with Victor. Down only to 1, who's trying to scramble on out of the situation. Leaving Victor alone will mean that Mika has the perfect line of sight onto their backsides.
You know a team is scary when the last member of the enemy team will decide to leave the ditch and run on the flat grounds wide in the open. That's how scared they are of this Geek Fam team. Geek Fam, they get edge control now on the north. 10 eliminations. It's going to come down to FaZe versus Geek Fam, and luckily for FaZe, they have 4 up. Geek Fam actually down to 3. Taking a look at it, they did lose 1 member. On the southern side, we got Furious Gaming now, finally forced to show their hand with 4 players. They will now take the high ground and take the fight to everyone else that they've been shooting at pretty much through the entirety of the game. TEM Entertainment down to 2, caught in a tough spot, and they also have to worry about another team down on the southern side. Now TEM Entertainment down to 2, GIDS on the north side, raining in pressure onto Furious Gaming. Furious Gaming does have 1 player knocked. Blue Zone crunching in. They might lose the entire team. It's just all down to Milos. Look at that, all 3 players trying to crawl in.
Only 1 team is remaining.
GIDS here. Now crunching in before the finish.
You cannot mess with Genesis. They will lose one on the way with Rejects actually stepping up. This is a fantastic form coming through for Rejects. They've completely shaped up what happened in that first map. GD will find that final hit onto Furious Gaming, but immediately gets retaliated on. Icy still in the midst, just on the edge. Geek Fam, in the meantime, they've lost one. Now they might be in danger of losing a second, as FaZe might be the first team to put up an assault against Geek Fam, as they've just been taking names after names after names. Will this be the final stop for Geek Fam, or will they still manage to be those survivors to move on into that next phase?
FaZe looking good for now, but they can't get the finish. All of Geek Fam stuck in a dip. But with flat ground for FaZe, they don't want to make the push either, even when they got a knock earlier. So it is pretty much stalemated. Position advantage for Geek, but manpower for FaZe. However, this next zone is going to force Geek Fam onto the opening themselves. And this could be the demise for Geek Fam. 4 players of FaZe. All they have to do is mount a good defense and they should be fine. But I see some smokes raining down for the Geek Fam team. This might cause a lot of trouble as the sightlines are starting to be blocked. Tony K, though, thinks differently as he gets a knock onto Mika. That's going to slow down the push just for a little bit. They have the time to get the revive and push once again with 4 a.m. now making a move with the 3 players. They've been sitting very quiet the entirety of the game, but now with 4 a.m. coming out, taking shots at the Reject team through the bus window, some very nice shots, but neither team losing a player yet.
And with 4 a.m. moving in, that provides an opportunity for Geek Fam to go more towards the southern side, but instead they're going to be heading straight into FaZe, dropping one immediately. Tony K down to a sliver of HP, and will go down swinging as well. Down, damn Rude, who picks up Lycan, looks for the second, has to retaliate as Vinatros comes through from the back line. So unfortunately, Geek Fam, it was that manpower to absolute explosive energy that did go the way of FaZe Clan. At least they did manage to, you know, put a hit into the FaZe Clan numbers.
We're finally down to the last 5 teams. By the way, IHC Icy still alive, swimming in from the water, playing so quiet. FaZe, after fighting with the likes of Geek Fam, too many of them got knocked in the process of that fight, and the other teams will take advantage. Now the Reject team up to 9 eliminations, getting 2 on 4 a.m. 4 a.m. with the bad full sin. They will go down as well, last-ditch effort, and now it's down to GK and the Rejects team. And Icy still in the picture. These teams are definitely thinking it's a 4v3. But Icy, he never got the meds. He's been swimming in the water, never had the meds, got onto land. Has he managed to find a box, maybe, to pick up some bandages? Icy, 1 HP. He's going to be as quiet as possible. Rejects and GK in a standoff. Last zone has already closed. It's just going to go straight into the middle, giving a huge advantage to GK as they control a majority of the terrain. Rejects slowly moving in, doing what they can, actually wrapping down, and actually GK will find Icy. Now it's a 3v2 situation. Whoever gets the first knock will be huge, but GK with a position, Hope coming out, holding the high ground, pretty much setting up a crossfire sightline for the Rejects team, making this extremely difficult. You see Rejects wanted to isolate the lower angle by sweeping down low, but the flats is not going to be good enough for them. And GK will crunch them in. Shots going back and forth here. Both Reject players stuck and cornered in the blue. 3v1 situation. It's down to Ray, but it is not enough, and GK will take a dub, and one of the probably more difficult Miramar matches we'll see for everybody out here.
Look, it came down to that awareness from GK Esports, using their numbers advantage to the absolute best. Moving on down, just with Stun, making sure that their flanking opportunities were cut down, making sure that there were no surprises from the likes of Icy. Not that I think Icy had any opportunity to do so, because as you said, only 1 HP, they were planning to just hide it up and see what placements could come from it. But because of that, because they managed to open up that space, they cut off the only opportunity that Rejects had to get a flanking position on them. And then just that 2-1 split in the final moments with Hope on the high rise, it was pretty much set and stone here for Rejects. They really didn't have space to work with.
Yeah, that was a slow grind of a match. Everybody towards that late game just getting advantages and then losing it back and forth. We saw Furious Gaming, you know, rise up with 4 and then instantly gets cut down. GK fighting through a multitude of teams. The Reject team surviving through, you know, all hell, just, you know, centering up very early and then just getting surrounded, but managing to set up a strong defense. Ultimately, though, this match, we do see the Japan team, the Reject team, the team that went out first in that last match will get a second place, but GK will get the chicken dinner instead.
And it's GK that end up winning the first Miramar match, but it does look like Reject end up stealing the most points here in the first Miramar of today, 7.
GK with an amazing performance back-to-back, by the way, for them to be able to come out with that chicken dinner with how much they had to rotate. Love the difference there from the first game to what we're seeing here. And then with that, I mean, Reject, we got to give him some props too. 12 eliminations, 24 points total, Imperium.
That's where experience can really come into play, right? You know, and you said it, this is PMGC, you know, and Reject proved that they deserve to be here, bouncing back from a poor game 1 to get a fantastic result in game 2, a little bit of revenge on the 4 Angry Men as well along the way. You know, 6 eliminations for Divine, 4 for Rejoko. You know, that purple hair is doing wonders, Hot Juice.
Oh yeah, it's the purple hair buff, man. You know, we've seen a couple players with the blonde hair buff, but the purple hair ends up winning the 6 eliminations, most elims in that last one right there. And man, I mean, just the plays, the movement that you see in Miramar, it's just so dynamic. The zone was a little bit toxic, I think. I don't think players were a really big fan of it, but still, you know, I think so. I think so, because anytime I see that particular zone going to like the south side, you know, it's just, it's always a pain, especially for rotating.
Yeah. And Sute made a pretty decent point that, like, it's an area of the map that not a lot of teams will traverse a lot of the time, obviously, unless the circle goes. That way, it's rare that it goes that, you know, that long in the southeastern side of the map for that long in the game. So, yeah, very unknown quantities for a lot of teams in that game 2-7.
I mean, when you go into the second circle and it is about 50 to possibly 60% water, yeah, I'd say it's a very, very toxic circle. But I was impressed with what some of the teams were able to do to counter that, right? We saw a little bit, even though there wasn't that much area for teams to move around, we saw teams willing to take a bit of a split to just pull a little bit more land. That's what you want to see. By the way, we saw Geek Fam Mika again on the top performance, which is great to see out of that team, because that team is being so aggressive. I love it.
The Geek Fam as a whole, even up until the bitter end, they still pushed FaZe, right? They were like, look, we're going down swinging, guys. They pushed in, they ended up losing it, but man, for them to have that level of aggression and just great team synergy, they weren't like too huddled together. You saw Yuhai was playing that kind of support role quite effectively in the back line. You had Mika in the front line. They were just really working so well together, playing on the high grounds on that northern side. It was so good. Like they punished the likes of T2K, who were too late rotating at a compound. They punished so many other teams around them. Yeah, just a wonderful performance again from Geek Fam.
I mean, when you have a player like Mika just go off like that, you know that's going to hype up the squad. Speaking of hype, let's go ahead and take a quick break to cool down a little bit, and we'll be right back here in just a second. And we're back. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you guys are really enjoying the show. And of course, we have to give a big thank you to our sponsors to make this show possible. Gotta give a shout out to Sony with their Xperia 1.4 and Xperia Stream. They were actually created in collaboration with professional esports players. You guys can play PUBG Mobile in 90 hertz with Xperia Stream's total cooling system and multiple ports for intensive gaming and streaming. Also, got to give a big shout out to our platinum sponsor, Prime Gaming. You guys can get some free in-game content with Prime Gaming, as well as some other great Prime benefits. So go check it out, get some in-game items, and check out some of their other premium content. You guys saw it there in the ad, and I hope you guys can enjoy it. Now that we've got that, I think it's time to take a look here at the overall rankings to see how everything is stacking up here after a couple matches, and it looks like Geekay Esports, with that consistency, are going to take the top spot for now, 7.
Consistency is definitely key, and that's what they've been able to do in the back-to-back matches. 39 points for them, but I mean, then you have 4 angry men with the performances that were able to put up in the first game, and kind of following up some there in the second game. Second place for them in Reject. This is going to be a big bounce back, right? Because remember, they're 0 points in the first match, and for them to make that jump up, it's huge, Imperium.
It is, but one thing that I've noticed, and I kind of slightly expected this in Group Yellow simply because of it being the first PMGC for a number of teams, it's quite top-heavy, right? You got kind of already over 30 points dividing 16th and kind of first, second, and third. So that's something that hopefully we will see change, because we want to see the bottom teams come back up and show us what they've got, but it does leave me a little bit worried.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm so excited for Sanhok. You know, Sanhok, I know, is going to wake up those teams at the bottom. It's going to wake everybody up, because the action is always like this, baby. Papa Blue is going to come in heavy, and let's see which teams that you guys are keeping an eye on here for this Sanhok match 7. I see you got Geek Bam on there. I think it makes sense how they're performing so far.
I do, and I'll tell you why in just a second. First of all, I want to talk about IHC, and the reason why I want to talk about them is because I felt like they could have done a lot better in the rotation if they wouldn't have taken 8 minutes to fully commit to an actual hot drop. That's how long it took for them to actually get into a fight against BESIKTAS. You can't wait that long. If you got to do a hot drop, you got to decide within at least 2 minutes. Okay, we are either going to be taking this fight, or we're going to be rotating out, because a lot of them got caught in the rotation. And then you got, Geek Fam. The aggressiveness that we're seeing out of this team. I absolutely love it, Imperium.
Definitely. Reject, the bounce back, incredibly impressive. Geekay, man, back-to-back strong results, especially against teams like 4 Angry Men, is not easy. This is their first PMGC, but they are making it count in a big way. And of course, at the Big One Boys, Furious, I saw them in Americas. I was a little bit worried, said it, but it was a much cleaner, swifter performance coming in from that southern edge. They didn't have as much traffic around them, but they still dealt with what they had very well. It was a step-by-step progress for them.
Some of their players do have PMGC experience, so I wonder if that's playing its part.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it has to. I think it has to, absolutely. Take a look at some of the player shots here. These players are getting ready. See some hearts being thrown up. And we'll see how the performance does. And hopefully we'll see those hearts still stay up here. Team's getting ready.
James, I got a question for you.
That's so crazy. No, go ahead, bring it.
I got a question for you, Imperium. Do we think we're going
Oh.
to be seeing, and also for everybody currently watching, let us know in chat as well, do you think we're going to be seeing any hot drops here in Sanhok?
Yes.
The answer? Yes. Okay,
Yes.
100%. All right, let's see if we're going to see them. Let's take it on over to our casters for some Sanhok action.
Thank you, Hot Jukes. Hot drops, yes or no? My money's on yes. Looking at these teams, the way they've been playing, I feel like certain teams are definitely confident in taking a fight or at least dropping on top of each other. And with Sanhok, of course, being such a small map, there's got to be at least one hot drop. Am I right, S-Proxy? At least one.
At least, man. I mean, we started off with Miramar, one of the biggest maps that we have available, and we still had hot drops. So over towards Sanhok, surely Ruins is going to have a little bit of action. I mean, there's so many great opportunities for hot drops on Sanhok that, you know, it could just be absolutely fire.
Speaking of Ruins, that was actually where the hot drop was happening in last week's Sanhok matches. Yeah, no one actually took the fight in boot camp, nor Paradise. We'll see how this one plays out. 4 a.m. out very early on the eastern side of things. On the north, we see two teams, Train to Kill and Genesis, I believe. No, that is actually Game Lords on the north side. It looks more like a split, though. 3 teams flying over boot camp. One of them is probably going towards Camp Alpha, I'd imagine. And 2 of them, though, are indeed landing within boot camp. A little bit of a split fight on the northern side. And then I do think we will have a boot camp hot drop.
Oh yes, that was BESIKTAS and FaZe, and we saw this happening in the scrims as well, so it looks like both teams are looking to set some dominance up in here. MR5 going to be the first player to drop down for the time being as BESIKTAS swarm on in, and this is beautiful for them because they're taking that central position and they're making sure that FaZe are actually split up. Now it's only 1-for-1 and each of those players are isolated.
Yeah, 2v3 situation now. Venturas did get a trade knock back. They need to add the pressure. They need to just go for it right now, even if it is unfavorable for them. Because the longer they take, they're just going to get revived. So now it's a 1v2. Venturas tries to get the second one. Now just like that, down to a 1v1 situation. It's all down to Peace. Peace versus Venturas here. A little jiggle back and forth. Oh, he goes aggressive. Venturas smelled the weakness. He will go for the clutch finish and will get the revive on Tony K. 1 HP. That was FaZe getting 2 knocked down early and only 1 trade back. So it was a 2v4 for the side of FaZe Clan, and FaZe will come out on top. Feel like BESIKTAS, yeah, they really need to work on just their close range synergy. We saw in that fight, you know, just on Miramar, they had one teammate isolated for the longest time, and they did not support him correctly. This time around, BESIKTAS starts off the fight with a 4v2, and then they end up losing that one as well. So BESIKTAS, they need to pull it together.
It's a question mark for me because they looked so much better in this engagement than what they've done in any of the other maps. I mean, they started off, they got those 2 eliminations, they isolated the final 2 players. They literally, again, to remind you, the last 2 players for FaZe were isolated. They had no backup. They weren't playing as a duo. They didn't have the opportunity. They had to just go in gunslinging and hoping that they were hitting the shots, and they did because BESIKTAS, I don't know, maybe it's a communication thing, maybe there was a little bit of chaos. But they need to turn it around. They need to keep that structure going as we saw them do that in the beginning phase of that engagement. So the opportunity is there, definitely. I just don't know what is just missing for BESIKTAS that they can't bring in that execution for the duration of that fight. But either way, that was an interesting bootcamp. And now the question is, do you think BESIKTAS are going to change their drop location for the next day on Sanhok?
Ooh, I think so. I think if you're a boot camp team, just in general, if you're a boot camp team, you gotta look more dominant than that. And so far, out of the 3 games, I do not see a aggressive team out of the likes of BESIKTAS. Not aggressive whatsoever. And this might sound harsh. I don't even feel like they're a team that's really, you know, playing optimally at all so far. Like the Miramar game, it just keeps coming back to me. 1 player isolated for that long, and no one had sightlines across the road. I feel like, you know, IHC that last game was wide in the open for someone to take shots at them or like apply some pressure, but we didn't see that at all. So I don't think BESIKTAS is cut out for that boot camp hot drop. And also, you need that killer mentality, right? Like, when it came down to that 1v1, as IHC right here getting into a fight, IHC, man, this team just keeps finding themselves in trouble. And that is going to be IHC losing one. I think Rejects will be fine. Looking at the rest of the map, I don't think there's going to be any other fights really engaging out. And just as I say that, it looks like IHC, they're not going to back down. They're actually going to get even more aggressive, getting close with the grenade. Rejects instead will be the ones to back up a little bit here.
Yeah, just managing to get that res onto Divine, who's trying to back off and get some res, but bam, they go down once again. Icy just pinpoint accurate, and they've got their duo in the form of Demo. They still have the likes of Alex as well, so they're going to be applying that pressure. And this is fantastic, picking up the second. This is huge. Now they just need to take that further.
Yeah, that was GEEK actually with the third party. That was the cross angle that the Rejects were really relying on to pin in the pressure. But getting third party, now all of a sudden, Rejects looking like, you know, holding a strong position with strong sightlines is suddenly at a huge disadvantage, pressured all the way back into a corner. Duello will try and get that revive, but it's not just Geek Fam here looking for eliminations. It's also IHC, and IHC getting peppered. Icy just a little bit. Duello, what can he do in this situation? This 1v3, he will get one knock onto Alex, but the trade quickly comes through. IHC looking a lot better here with 3 eliminations already and polarizing performances for Rejects. Going out first on Erangel, getting a second place and ending up with the most points in the second match with the amount of eliminations. Back down to being the first team taken out on the third map.
Well, technically the second if we talked about BESIKTAS. So
oh, right.
It's okay. Too much happens. Too much happening. And already FaZe has joined the third-party action. I thought it was going to be Geek Fam to apply that pressure to IHC, but unfortunately they are just caught in the midst of danger. FaZe already with 5 eliminations off of the back of that boot camp action. But again, they're running here with only a duo. Demo going to be peeking around the corner, applying so much damage, but unfortunately not hitting those final shots to make it count. But Icy is here for the backup.
Yeah, good trades for IHC. This team showing signs of potential greatness. The aggression's there. The aim is there. The knocks are there. It's just that they're constantly running into multitudes of teams to fight against and just getting a little bit caught out. Maybe too aggressive, especially for Sanhok, right? Third partying is always a huge concern for everybody on Sanhok, so maybe this was not the map to go guns blazing. But at least they pick up a few eliminations. Down to just 1 player now for IHC. Maybe they'll pull off another miracle placement. And I do think, it was actually Icy. It was Icy. Just sneak his way all the way into 3rd place on the last Miramar match. Next circle comes out. We will be shifting down to the south, so a lot of question marks for these teams no longer, there, because it could have been northwest, could have been on the eastern side, could have been on the southern side, but now more than likely it will be a southern finish for Sanhok. And we're already down to 50 players, Proxy.
It's ridiculous. I mean, the opportunity there for Icy is that there's a lot of rivers, there's a lot of water, so if they want to take another swim into great placements, it's available, of course, but the rest of the teams are going to be applying a lot of pressure. As we know, so many teams rotating on in from both that northwestern side, from Camp Alpha, and the northeastern side being, of course, Boot Camp with Nongshim RedForce, and of course the likes of Genesis, DOGMA, GIDS moving on in from that cave direction. So the outskirts of the zone is going to be quite packed. But the question here now is, how is FaZe going to get themselves out of the situation? First, they thought they had to worry about IHC. That's okay. That's done for the time being. Then Geek Fam was in the vicinity, but now 4 angry men move on up into this contention here. And this is an interesting opportunity because Nongshim RedForce just on the other end making a similar rotation.
And Game Lords doing the same exact rotation, running into Nongshim RedForce. That was a quick rotation knock right there. Game Lords, they do get the info that there is a team ahead of them now. Game Lords might look to wrap all the way back around. They do have vehicles. Nongshim will pick up that little moped for themselves. But yeah, Nongshim has the likes of 4 AM to go through. They have a lot of teams to go through. But with these vehicles, they might just, rotate and swing all the way around. They hear the gunshots, just south of them. And it looks like they're, instead of trying to peek on over there, they're going to turn, tail, and wrap around. There is a lot of space to work with, though, because so many teams did fight early, so that clears up a lot rotations-wise.
FaZe, I can tell you one thing, they are definitely not afraid. They are still applying the pressure to 4 Angry Men, hopefully giving themselves some space at least in for a few more minutes into the zone. They've already taken 1 knock from 4AM. Unfortunately, they can't move on in for that elimination, because if they do, it's a 2-on-4. So I don't know how it's going to pan out for them, at least for the time being. That firepower will suppress the push from 4AM. But it's going to be a question mark to see how long they can last here and how many other teams might jump into the third-party opportunity.
Seems like more teams deciding to wrap around on this one. A lot of teams fearing the bridge cap, and rightly so. We do have a Geek fam with 1 player, Snipes, camping the bridge on the western side, and of course, FaZe and 4AM holding that bridge crossing as well. Things will slow down just a little bit here as teams are trying to figure out where to go in this zone. Looks like more often than not, teams will just edge into the side and wait for the next circle shift before making their next move on Sanhok.
Train to Kill has been one of those teams that I feel like they've been so close into making something happen, but then, I mean, we had a 1v4 happen on Erangel. How are you supposed to predict that? How are you supposed to imagine that that was something that was going to happen? But again, that comes down to the side of Train to Kill. Hopefully now coming through from the southern portion, it might give them some opportunity. That zone moving to the south as well means that it cuts the amount of time they have to rotate a little bit shorter. But Geekay Esports just up ahead of them. We still have this contention with 4AM and FaZe, and now the added pressure of the zone shift and Nongshim RedForce in the vicinity.
Nongshim RedForce do have those mopeds, so they might go for a very fast rotation after doing some proper scouting, and here comes the rotation now. It's risky, definitely. Rotating on the moped in Sanhok. Can easily get ripped out, and 1 player dropping off, setting up some quick cover fire potentially. Or maybe he just does not want to be on the back of a moped. I don't blame them.
Would rather take a swim, that's all, Zute. You know, it's a little bit hot in Sanhok, so just going to be taking a quick dip and moving on into that rotation.
Speaking about rotations, we have Genesis DOGMA GIDS here, rotating by Furious Gaming on the high ground, applying a good amount of pressure. But Genesis DOGMA GIDS should be okay. If they just wrap a little bit more down to the south, there's almost nobody on the southern sides besides Train to Kill, the team you mentioned. So they'll get a nice little entryway far deep in the southern side. Meanwhile, Xavier wrapping far south from the western side. A little bit split up, though. All 3 players just on different sections of the western water side.
It's going to be interesting, because if they can move into that direction there by Nakem, but they will be pretty close to Train to Kill later on with that phase shift. But at least for the time being, hopefully they can group up. They can get themselves prepped in to move from that southwestern portion, because then they've got a fantastic opportunity with Geekay Esports moving to smack bam center zone, allows more of that space towards the southern portion. FaZe getting caught out by the team they were not expecting. FALCONS moving on in here for the kill, already found 1, and now they want to finish off the likes of FaZe completely.
This is an interesting push for Falcon. This area of the map is not in zone, and Blue Zone's so close behind. I saw they had 4 players and vehicles. They could have potentially just taken a fight more in zone. Maybe they want to clear out everything slowly, and luckily for them, right, FaZe is only down to 2 players.